Okay, we have talked about almost everything having to do with what we're looking at when we first open up AutoCAD LT. Just a couple of final features to talk about. What I want to talk about are things that are kind of hanging around the outside of our graphics area here. First thing I'm going to talk about is in the upper left, just above the graphics area, are these tabs. In AutoCAD, we can have more than one file open at a time, and each file that we open will create its own tab. I've got this little asterisk after the words drawing 1. That's a signal to me that the drawing hasn't been saved. That asterisk is a signal to me that the drawing hasn't been saved. I'm just using it for demonstration purposes, so I don't really have to save it. Right now, because I've only got one file open, it only says drawing 1. If I pick my new command up here to start a new one, by default it's going to ask me to select a template to use, and that's a template is a file that has all sorts of drawn and undrawn information already stored in it, so that I don't have to recreate that at the beginning of every drawing session. I'll just use this, very generic ACAD LT template file, and I'll say open. Open is kind of a bad name for this button. It almost should just say use. We're not really going to open up that file. We're just going to use that file to start a new one, and everything that's stored in that file will be stored in our new file. So I'll pick open, and now I've got another new file that I'm working on, and you can see that I've got drawing 1 and drawing 2. I don't have excuse me, I don't have the asterisk next to it because there's nothing worth saving yet. We didn't really do anything. If I just, we'll talk more about the line command later, but if I grab my line tool and pick and hit enter, now that asterisk appears. So if you're working away and you see these asterisks, it's a good idea to save your file. We'll talk more about saving files later on, but the asterisk is what you're kind of looking for up there. To go from one drawing to another, just simply pick the tab, and now I'm working on that one. In this file, I don't have the grid showing in the background. In this file, I do happen to have the grid showing in the background, and I've got that line that I drew. So we'll leave it at that for right now. The next set of tabs that I want to talk about are down here at the bottom. Down here at the bottom, underneath our command prompt window, are tabs that relate just to whatever drawing file tab happens to be active. What these are referred to as the model tab and the layouts tab. Think of layouts as just different ways to plot your drawing out. Very often we'll only have one layout down there. Sometimes you might have maybe sometimes you print on an A size sheet, sometimes on a B size, other times a C size or a D size. You might have an A size, a B size, and then additional layouts can be created with this plus sign of a C size and a D size. When we get into printing and plotting later on in our video series, you'll understand more about working with these layouts, but that's what's there for right now. The bulk of our work while we're drawing for right now is going to take place on the model tab, and that's the tab that happens to be active. You can kind of see it's a little bit darker. It's not as easy to see which tab is active. It's just a little bit bolder. And the more I look at the drawing tabs up here, it's not all that easy to see which layout, or excuse me, which drawing is actually active. If I hover over one of these drawing tabs, then kind of a little preview of the tabs that are down along the bottom of that drawing show up. So if I wanted to go into this drawing and look at layout 1, all I have to do is just kind of hover there for a second and then pick layout 1, and I would be working on that drawing file, or on that drawing, and I would be in that layout. In that layout might not mean anything to you right now because we haven't worked a lot with it, but we haven't worked at all with it. But I will talk about layouts and printing and plotting later on. Just understand that if you happen to hover a little bit longer than normal, you can pick it. You can see the layouts that are associated with the drawing file. If you just want to go and work on whatever model tab, layout tab you were working on previously in Drawing 1, just go there and pick it, and that's where you'll be. If I do happen to go to Layout 1, right here, there's my layout. It's showing me a sheet of paper. It's showing me a viewport. If I go to Drawing 2, I'm there. If I go back to Drawing 1, I'm working on the layout. That's where I was the last time I left Drawing 1. If I decided I want to go back to Drawing 2, and now I want to work in model space on Drawing 1, if I just hover there for a second and pick model space, I'm going to switch to that drawing, plus I'm going to switch to that tab down here. Might be kind of confusing because we haven't talked about model space versus paper space layouts, but we will be talking about that in the future. The last thing I want to talk about as far as the interface itself goes is down here in the lower right corner. We have a series of what I like to refer to as toggles in what's referred to as the taskbar area. Excuse me, Autodesk comes with a certain number of toggles already showing on here, and some of them are active and some of them are inactive, or conversely, some of them are on and some of them are off. If they're blue, they're on. If they're gray, they're off. Some of them have little drop downs that you can adjust the settings within them. We'll talk more about those as we go. I'll talk about a few of them yet within this video, but we'll talk about more of them as they become more pertinent. The key, though, is that there are a lot of toggles that can be made to be visible. If I pick, I don't know who came up with it, but somebody started calling this the hamburger icon a few years ago. If I pick these 3 horizontal lines, it lets me customize what toggles are available. Not whether they're on or not, just whether they're visible on the taskbar. If I pick this, the list of all the different toggles that can be on will be on, okay, or will be shown to you, and which ones are on will be shown to you with a check mark. Now I'm going to kind of just work my way down the list and talk about the ones that I think will become valuable to us, and that I've found valuable to me, and ones that just aren't all that valuable. Coordinates. I actually find that to be kind of helpful to be toggled on. So I'm going to go ahead and toggle that on. And this drop down, well, it's kind of a pop-up, I guess. But this list is a little bit more intelligent than the customizing of the quick access toolbar. If you'll remember, as soon as we did something, that menu folded up. This one stays active and lets me do more than one thing with it. So I got coordinates on. I like the model space toggle. We don't know what that does, but it is valuable. I never work with grid, so I'm going to toggle that toggle off so I can't see it. Okay, I'll pick it again. See this little grid icon right there? When I pick this, it goes away. I'm not seeing it anymore. So it just makes it unavailable. Right here is the coordinates showing up. I added that when I picked that, turned it on, turned it off, turn it back on. Okay, I'm going to kind of go through the rest of the list now. Snap mode, I don't find that to be valuable either. That's helpful if we're doing like electrical schematics or things like that. Not very pertinent in a civil engineering or a mechanical engineering environment, so I'll toggle that off. Dynamic input, I always have it turned on, so I'm going to pick this just to toggle the button on, and you can see that it came on now, and it's blue, so I know it's on. I don't really need to see it. I never do turn it off, so I'll just leave it unpickable down here. Okay. Ortho mode, we don't ever need that. Polar tracking, it kind of takes the place of ortho mode. Ortho mode is kind of an old school tool. Polar tracking has a lot more features, including the ability to work orthogonally. So we'll just use that tool. I like polar tracking on. Isometric drafting, we're not going to do any of that, so I'll toggle that tool off. Excuse me. Object snap tracking, very valuable. I like that. I'll leave that on. Object snaps, I like that. Line weights, I actually like to work with line weights, and I like to toggle them on and off, so I will make that icon available, or that toggle available. I never work with transparency, so I leave it off. Selection cycling doesn't come up that often, so I leave it off. Annotation visibility, auto scale, and annotation scale. I'm going to leave those on, even though we won't get to them for quite a while. We could, worry about toggling them on later on. But you know what? We're not really chewing up all that much space, so let's just leave them there for right now. Workspace switching. I never switch from workspaces. Workspaces is kind of like the ribbon, but it gets a little deeper than that. It's the whole appearance of the way you're using AutoCAD. I just use it the way it is, so I don't bother changing workspaces. The annotation monitor kind of goes in conjunction with these. We don't need it very often, but let's just leave it available. Units, that's kind of neat. That just became available as a pick for down here. It's kind of a nice way of verifying what units you're working with, and that'll mean more in the next video that I do. So I'm going to go ahead and toggle the units toggle on. Quick properties, super valuable. I'm going to leave that on also. I can't believe that Autodesk out of the box didn't leave that toggled on. Locking the user interface, I'm not worried about that. I like to have control over it, so I won't make that lockable by anybody by accident. Isolating objects, I don't typically ever work with that. There's other ways to do it, so I'm going to make that pick unavailable. And I never use the clean screen tool or graphics performance. I'm not worried about either of those, so I'm going to toggle that off. So those are the tools that I like to have available to me down here. You know what? Thinking back here, annotation monitor, that's this plus sign thing. I don't really like that. It gets kind of confusing in there. And annotation visibility and auto scaling, both of those bother me too. I do like to have the annotation scale visible. That'll mean more later on. I'm going to toggle that off and toggle that off. And we'll leave, no, I won't either. I'm going to toggle this off. So sorry about that. I could have saved about 30 seconds worth of video by just having us turn it off to begin with. I'm going to get rid of it. Here's the tools that are very valuable in a 2D drafting environment. Our coordinates, our model space, polar tracking, object snap tracking, 2D object snaps, line weights, units, quick properties. Those are super valuable. That's all I really need to work with. I'm all done adjusting what tools are available down here. I'll just pick outside here to make that disappear. And there's our setup. I'm already quite deep time-wise into this video, so I will create a separate video talking about how I like to have these set on and off, and then some of these have particularly deeper settings, so I'll work with that, talk about those in another video. So that's it for the interface and initial setups. So if you've been following along, this is kind of what your screen should look like. If it doesn't, maybe it's personal preference. Maybe you liked the command prompt the way it was before. I like 3 lines showing and having it docked. Maybe later on you'll discover that you like other taskbar items to be showing up. You can play with that. You can make AutoCAD look whatever makes sense to you. This is what makes sense to me. So that is it for the interface and the initial setup.